As an investigative journalist, I found myself with a few questions about the emergence of fake news as a phrase and as a fad. Number one, what is fake news and what is not? Number two, when did fake news begin? And number three, most interesting of all, I've investigated the shadowy multi-billion-dollar industry that seeks to manipulate all of us through news, social media, and online. So I wondered, who's behind the massive effort to direct our attention onto fake news? Is fake news real? First, the definition of fake news depends on where you sit. It's not as if there's an extreme dictionary authority that gets to decide for everybody, though some are trying, more on that in a moment. But when did fake news under anybody's definition begin? Well, fake news has always been embedded in our culture. It just wasn't called that. The supermarket rags gave popular rise to blatantly fake news, with front-page images of aliens impregnating unsuspecting, usually large-breasted earthling women. Most people probably believe little to nothing of what they read in these publications. A few people might have believed everything. But there are countless examples of fake news surfacing in mainstream news. Example. In 1996, a news media frenzy wrongly blamed a security guard named Richard Jewell for the Atlanta Olympic bombing. We later learned that poor Jewell had actually been a hero, moving people away from a suspicious backpack before it exploded. On 9/11, a network TV news reporter falsely reported that a terrorist plane had crashed in the presidential retreat Camp David. Never happened. The internet revolutionized fake news, whether we're talking about a rumor or intentional disinformation or biased, sloppy, erroneous reporting. What would have circulated amongst a relative few could now develop a global following overnight. Example, in 2012, 26 people were murdered at Sandy Hook Elementary. Blogs and social media immediately began circulating rumors and images, insisting the whole thing was a hoax drummed up by the government and staged by actors. In 2014, Rolling Stone magazine reported on a sensational case of a fraternity gang rape that turned out to be so unsubstantiated that Rolling Stone retracted the article and the reporter was found guilty of malice in a defamation lawsuit. And whatever you think of the 2014 police shooting of Michael Brown, even the Obama Justice Department eventually ruled that the entire hands up, don't shoot scenario, which blanketed the news day in and day out, was probably fabricated and that the police officer acted in legitimate self-defense. But it wasn't until 2016 that the actual phrase fake news was introduced to the American public on a national scale. Liberals were first to heavily promote use of the phrase, referring to conservative disinformation and right-wing websites, and there's certainly plenty of that. Example, as Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton battled it out, a website called the Conservative Daily Post published a huge amount of pro-Trump, anti-Clinton propaganda under the name and likeness of a former beauty queen named Laura Hunter. But the real Laura Hunter says she didn't write any of those articles. She claims imposters turned her into a spokesman for a radical right-wing website that peddles fake news. She sued them. Meantime, Trump and conservatives counterpunch with their own notion of fake news, meaning biased, sloppy, erroneous reporting, as committed by the mainstream media and the left. Plenty of that, too. Example, on President Trump's first day in office, a Time magazine reporter falsely reported that Trump had removed the bust statue of Martin Luther King from the Oval Office. The White House quickly tweeted out a photo showing the statue was still very much there. The reporter, perhaps blinded by his own bias, hadn't followed the most basic tenets of beginning journalism: check your facts. So if fake news by other names has always been around, why does it suddenly become the stuff of daily headlines during the 2016 campaign? I did a little digging and I traced the effort to a nonprofit called First Draft, which appears to be about the first to use the phrase fake news in its modern context. On September 13th, 2016, First Draft announced a partnership to tackle malicious hoaxes and fake news reports. The goal was supposedly to separate wheat from chaff, to prevent unproven conspiracy talk from figuring prominently in internet searches, to relegate today's version of the alien baby story to a special internet oblivion. Exactly 1 month later, President Obama chimed in. He insisted in a speech that he too thought somebody needed to step in and curate information in this wild, wild west media environment. Nobody in the public had been clamoring for any such thing. Yet suddenly, the topic of fake news dominates headlines on a daily basis. It's as if the media had been given its marching orders. Fake news, they insisted, was an imminent threat to American democracy. But as somebody who studied the industry that seeks to manipulate all of us on behalf of paid interests, I know that few themes arise in our environment organically. A noted propagandist told me, "It's like a movie," he said, and it gave me chills at the time. Nearly every scene or image that crosses our path in daily life, he said, was put there for a reason, often by someone who paid a lot of money to place it there. What if the whole anti-fake news campaign was an effort on somebody's part to keep us from seeing or believing certain websites and stories by controversializing them or labeling them as fake news? But who would want to do such a thing? When connecting the dots, I find it often helps to follow the money. I wanted to know who was funding the nonprofit First Draft and its anti-fake news effort. I found the answer. It was Google. Google's parent company Alphabet was run by a man named Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt, as it happens, had devoted himself to Hillary Clinton's election campaign, offered himself up as a campaign advisor, and became a top multi-million-dollar donor to it. His company funded First Draft around the start of the election cycle. Not surprisingly, Hillary was soon to jump aboard the anti-fake news train, and her surrogate David Brock of Media Matters privately told donors he was the one who convinced Facebook to join the effort. I'm not the only one who thinks the whole thing smacked of the rollout of a propaganda campaign. Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept wrote, "The most important fact you need to realize is that those who most loudly denounce fake news are typically the ones most aggressively disseminating it." But something happened that nobody expected. The anti-fake news campaign backfired. Each time advocates cried fake news, Donald Trump called them fake news until he'd co-opted the term so completely that even those who were originally promoting it started running from it, including the Washington Post, which in January of 2017 wrote, "It's time to retire the tainted term fake news." In fact, it's now commonly misreported that it was Donald Trump who thought up the phrase. Actually, it was just a hostile takeover. Suffice it to say that each side now defines fake news in terms that call the other guy into question. So, what's the lesson in all of this? I'm not here to litigate who's right, but I can tell you there are two ways to tell that powerful interests might be trying to manipulate your opinion. Number one, when the media seems to be trying to shape or censor facts and opinions rather than report them. Number two, when so many in the media are reporting the same stories, promulgating the same narratives, relying on the same sources, even using the same phrases. I mean, think of it. There are literally thousands of legitimate news stories that could be reported in a given day and an infinite number of ways to report them. When everybody's on the same page, it might be the result of an organized campaign. I'll leave you with a final thought and a warning. It's about a new catchphrase being bandied about, media literacy, as in we'll tell you who to trust and who not to trust. Media literacy advocates are busy trying to get state laws passed to require that their version of media literacy be taught in public schools. They're developing websites as resources for journalists and the public. They're partnering with universities. I think media literacy is a new name promoted by some of the same people who want to tell you what to believe. People with their own agendas using terms designed to fool you into thinking they're neutral authorities. What you need to remember is that when interests are working this hard to shape your opinion, their true goal might just be to add another layer between you and the truth.